Hello, this is Tia Santana from the Delaware Contemporary. Thank you so much for joining us in these conversations. I have a special guest with me today, and our special guest is artist Robyn Phillips-Pendleton, who is a professor of visual communications in the Department of Art at the University of Delaware. Robyn, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
I wanted to take this time to dive into personal narratives and talk with you a little bit about your art process and your work. How does your process inform the Crown Act in specifics to natural hair movement, being comfortable in your hair, and how does that work communicate to your art?
My work has been about the narrative for a very long time. I started really as an illustrator and visual communicator, illustrator and graphic designer. And over the years, and I've always painted. I've always painted as a first language, if you will. And I've always told stories and loved stories, in my work. And when I started thinking about my own hair journey and just being a little Black girl growing up in Virginia, thinking about how I grew up and conforming, and we didn't think it was conforming then, but sort of like the ritual of hair and the discussion of hair, and how that was a story within itself, and just in my own kind of mental discussions about different stories that I wanted to tell as an artist, as a storyteller, and thinking about other people's journeys, other Black women's journeys, and what that means sort of holistically, culturally, historically, and personally. And my work and that subject found its way together and fused, through my own personal journey and, what people have gone through. So that's.
Thank you so much for sharing. Excuse me. Thank you so much for sharing. I wanted to talk to you a little bit. You mentioned that you started off as an illustrator, and drawing, and drawing tells that narrative and it tells that story. How important is drawing as a communication tool? You're not using words, but you're using images.
Drawing is the key to everything. Whether it's design, whether it's, you can't make a great painting without a great drawing. So drawing is the basis for everything. I mean, it's the history of drawing, and we understand pictures before we understand words, as people. I mean, we put pictures together as children before we learn how to speak. One picture plus another picture equals sort of this sort of short story. And I think drawing is really the foundation and the base for all of that. And I started with drawing and then went into painting and then went into illustration and then storytelling. So, and coming back to really full circle of using drawing as a way to get my ideas down after writing and drawing. It's sort of that kind of reciprocal relationship between the two. So ideas, how do I want to get ideas out? Drawing and writing and figuring out what the balance is. How do I use the drawings? How do I communicate through the compositional structure of drawings, and trying to figure out whether that drawing culminates into a painting or some type of visual language that might be between the two. But it's always based on strong drawings with the narrative at the base.
Thank you.
Welcome.
What is it that you want for the what is it that you would like for the viewers to take away from this specific body of work that's exhibited in this exhibition? If there are going to be so many different so many different viewers who are viewing this work. Maybe some people for the first time, maybe some people are going to view this work and they may have their own narratives that they're bringing, of course, to the table. What do you want your viewers to walk away with?
You mean for the whole show?
For the whole show.
I want people to have conversations at the show, after the show, on the way home, a month, a year after the show, and really think about culture and inclusion and information that they were able to maybe think about differently, process differently, discover. I want them to be able to see other people's journeys, maybe compare, contrast to their own. Figure out like who they are in other people's eyes and vice versa. I think that it is a conversation that I want people to reference, and really just, kind of settle into as a part of society, history, just a way of being, with people coming together and sharing experiences. So that's what I hope to be a part of.
Thank you so much. And thank you for being a part of the start of the conversations, the visual conversation. I think that, like you said, it is so rich. These conversations are so rich in history, and they have such great of an expansion of shared experiences and narratives, and experiences that are common across the world. The more I speak to people, no matter what their map location is, they're sharing these same similar stories, and these conversations are able to be like, they cross over, and they cross over even culturally. So I think that, I too am looking forward to some deep conversations about this. I wanted to end on asking you to share a personal narrative, whether it is a narrative that is lived or a narrative that may have been witnessed. If you would like to share a narrative, a personal narrative with the audience.
I think that narrative is really going to be the story of my Saturday hair rituals with my mother. And starting at a young age of what it meant to get your hair straightened, and what that was about, and thinking back on it as an adult to a child, that time in my life where it was sort of a grind. But I remember the time being carved out to iron the linen napkins, and to be able to watch Soul Train on TV at 5 o'clock, and to kind of use that hour where the commercials were about hair, they were all about Black hair care products. Afro Sheen, Ultra Sheen, Fashion Fair Cosmetics. I was just in heaven for that hour waiting to get my hair done. And knowing that I wasn't going to be able to go outside afterwards because, you know, humidity and moisture is the kiss of death when you're going to church the next morning. So you can't ruin all that work that your mother did to get your hair straightened. You know, and I remember, and this was in the 70s. So early 70s, we're talking about early to mid 70s. And then the all Black commercials went to the infiltration of the Breck Girl in that. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, what's going on? Like what, you know, things are changing around me. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what that is.
Ooh, for some of our viewers, what is the Breck Girl?
The Breck Girl, interestingly enough, was created by an illustrator. I didn't know that. But so there were all these illustrations of the perfect white girl who had the perfect hair. And in order to get that perfect look, you had to use Breck shampoo. So I was like, and we bought Breck shampoo. Ironically, we brought Breck shampoo. And, you know, it was sort of this cultural kind of phenomenon of the Breck Girl. I didn't know any of that. I mean, really until I became an adult to look back on it and say, oh, wow, you know, this construction of that narrative that then became this, you know, this sort of infiltration into my world, and the worlds collided within that 1 hour of this whole hair ritual for me. And just remembering and going back as an adult and saying, wow, you know, the conformity of why our hair was straightened, you know, like thinking about being presentable, the idea of having to be your hair straightened to be presentable in church and at special events. And, you know, after the straightening comb came the relaxer. And so that whole notion of straight hair to maybe be like the Breck Girl, or to be, you know, to conform to society where, oh, no one's going to listen to you if you don't have straight hair, or no one's going to take you seriously if you don't have straight hair or tamed hair, or whatever the idea of that was. But being a kid in the middle of it, you don't think about those things. When you're an adult and all of these things are happening around you where, oh, I can wear my hair any way I want now, any way I want. But looking back on that story and remembering like it was yesterday, and finding myself not agreeing with a lot of it, you know, is really a huge revelation. There's some nostalgia in it, but there's also some sadness. So I have mixed feelings, emotions about that story. Mm-hmm. And having gone through, you know, would I change having gone through that? No, I wouldn't change it, but I look at things a lot differently now as an adult, and, you know, not thinking about having to conform. Mm-hmm. For any cultural reasons, for any racial reasons, for any reason at all, which is liberating.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And a lot of the trauma from I've been listening to the stories, and a lot of the trauma that we've been induced to as people of color when it comes to like our hair and these perceived ideas about what our hair should look like and what it should be starts off in our fundamental years. So it starts off and it's not just from from an institutional retrospective, but it's also ingrained, it's so deep that institutionalism is so deep that it's ingrained in our culture. Like it truly is
Oh,
like it,
yeah.
that straightening your hair for church, got to be presentable for church, and that straightening your hair to like for work, like, and then thinking about, like you said, we don't think about it as children. And then reflecting back, there is a sadness to it. And I am happy to hear, like, and to hear for you, there's a liberation, because that's not always the case for everyone, that they reach that point where they're freed from some of the ideas that they've been they've been struggling with
Mhm.
or dealing with. I think that, I've heard just so many stories where people are sad and they're still struggling with looking at themselves and seeing themselves for who they really are.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a lot, and the weekend ritual versus um even what happens at school when you're a kid, and I went to a predominantly white uh elementary school, and the whole idea of white kids not understanding, well, how come your ponytail doesn't look like mine? How come your ponytail doesn't move like mine? And just conversations about that as a kid. And you don't really know, how do you handle that as I don't know, a 7-year-old or 8-year-old having that conversation? Why should you have to explain your ponytail versus somebody else's? So
Right.
it's really, it's a lot, and
I
it
think
has been a lot.
the language too, when we think about that 7-year-old, do they have the vocabulary and the language to actually articulate it?
Right.
And then, you think about, I remember when I was teaching at a school, and it was it was kind of freeing. And I went to a school, and it was a charter school, and it was a like high school, and it was predominantly people of color. And I saw students walking around with their bonnets on. I mean, students were walking around with their dreads. They had, all different hairstyles, and it was kind of liberating to see, like they were
Mhm.
free to like be themselves. Like, it was there, this is my bonnet, what it's about. So I don't have to explain, why I have it, or if they had their hair, if they had their hair pin curls, there was an understanding. And I think that listen to some of the conversations, like that 7-year-old girl who's like questioning why doesn't her ponytail look like that. There's also the question that the 7-year the other white students in the
Yeah.
school, where did they get the imagery or
Right.
of what it is that this Black girl's hair should look like, or this person of color's hair should look like? And how do they know to be accepting of some styles
Exactly.
and not as accepting of other styles? All of those questions are it comes along with, I think it's so important to change the system early, in our institutional
Absolutely.
structures.
Yeah, absolutely. And um, facial features and eye color and all of that, goes into those sort of subtleties, but not so subtle subtleties,
Mhm, mhm.
and on the playground, at school, and, all of these things. So um, the 70s was an interesting time for all of that.
On a plus note, I'm really glad that a memory that you have is that time carved out with your mom. That's a
Mhm.
a special thing to have, is just knowing, like, and looking forward to that. I've read a few books, and a few of the authors talked about that carved out time with their parents, because our parents were super busy, but that's one thing that you had the bucket of grease and the breads and whatever you're gonna do, like you brung it and you sat down and you knew like
Yeah.
what was going on. So like those are some really thank you, positive memories. So thank you so much for sharing.
Well, thank you for the time and inviting me to show my work and share my stories. And what you just said was really uh, also interesting too, because it taught me a lot about my hair, and even now I don't go to the hairdresser because my mother taught me how to do everything I need to know, how to do anything I want to do to my hair. My mother taught me how to do it. So
That's a
that,
connection that you'll always have. My mom did the same thing. Like my mom, my first braiding session was on my mom's head, on my mom's hair. She braided my hair for years, and then she taught me how to braid her hair. And then same, I don't go to the hair salon. I braid my everything that I need to know, like was passed down, and that's such a treasure. Oh my goodness, thank you so much for sharing.
thank you. Thank you.
Robyn, thank you so much for speaking with me today. It's a pleasure to speak with you, and it has been. We are looking forward to seeing your work in the exhibition, and I wish you well and all the best.
Thank you so much for having me. And I am looking forward to the opening of the show and seeing all the other work and seeing all the other stories and having this ongoing experience about hair.
Awesome. You be well.
You too.